All right. Hi, everybody. This is actually my second attempt here to do this correctly this morning. So, we are going to talk today about organizational culture and technology. I just want to give a couple of little heads up notes before I get going into the lecture part. Um, Feel free to reach out to me with any questions or concerns you have. I am going to try to be available via Zoom as much as possible today, tomorrow, all week, all next week. I'm also trying to respond to my emails super fast. And of course, if you have questions, you're welcome to join our group me and text me questions there quickly, which sometimes is, if it's just a short little clarification point, sometimes that's the best way to get your question answered quickly. My apologies in advance if you hear noise in the background. We're all working from home currently. This is just kind of like the state of things. And so I've got the kids home with me today. They're currently doing some arts and crafts in the living room, but I can't guarantee that they'll stay occupied the whole time. Last but not least, I'm going to try to keep the lecture relatively short today just so that you can keep your focus on it. Sometimes it's really hard to watch super long videos online. But if you have any other questions or you want to talk about this material further, feel free to reach out. That's what we're, having to use technology here to share the information together, to make sense of it, to understand. And I'm happy to help you with that as much as I can. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start sharing our info here. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint. So today in the syllabus I was looking, and it says that we're talking only about organizational culture, but really that chapter is all about technology in the workplace. So I thought it would be nice to kind of talk about organizational culture and technology. And one of the first things that will help us tie this all together is how we talked about cultural assimilation in the workplace, right? We discussed this. This is that kind of process of learning the norms, the rules, the policies of the organization that you start in. But how do we use technology to also assimilate or get used to those rules and practices in our workplace? Well, there's a lot of different ways that technology is used today. I feel like we are currently living in the height of trying to use technology to continue going about our daily lives right now. So you have a lot of companies will have their kind of own internal or online communication, their own network servers for protection. I know that there are those of you in the classroom who definitely know a lot more about that than I do. And so perhaps you can kind of share some of your thoughts whenever we have our discussion board posts about that tomorrow. We also use email servers, text messaging, phone calls, cell phones, smartphones to connect with each other. And noticing what are the kinds of norms and practices and standards at your organization is another way that you can pick up those cultural norms. This is even something if you are given a company phone, sometimes that has its own separate set of expectations. I know Dustin didn't have to have his own company phone. He bought a little, I call it a burner phone, but it's like a little Go phone, flip phone that has zero smart capabilities on it, but that's his work phone. So for him, it helps him separate, his work environment from his personal environment. Of course, another way that we use technology in the workplace is through social media. A lot of different organizations have social media accounts and social media managers and social media policies. In fact, some of you have talked about wanting to develop a social media policy as part of your persuasive speech. So thinking about, what are the norms and expectations? Are you allowed to use social media throughout the day? Are you supposed to stay off of it? What are the guidelines for what you can and can't post in your personal time, etc. And then, of course, computer usage, right? So are you using specific kinds of computers? Are they work computers? Is there an expectation to have your own personal computer that you're using? Do you have tablets? Just all of that technology part is another part of the organizational culture that you are working in. Okay, thank you. I'm glad you got to say hi, Knuckle. Okay. A couple of guidelines that will help you achieve your professional excellence whenever you're thinking about computers and technology in the workplace is first you want to be able to understand what is the definition of computer-mediated communication. I would make a note, go back in the textbook, star this definition, read through that whole section on computer-mediated communication. This is a lot of the kind of communication literature and scholarship about technology stems from this definition, this term. Effectively, what it means is anytime that you're using computers or any kind of internet, email, texting, some people would even argue, but that kind of non-traditional communication. It's not face-to-face and it's not mass media like television or radio, but those computer elements that connect us, that is a form of computer-mediated communication. And being able to distinguish that as something separate from face-to-face communication, something separate from mass media, right? Those are all different ways to communicate, and they have different kinds of structures and everything. Let me pause for a second and gonna actually. All right, sorry about that. Have lots of Zooming going on. So we're gonna get back to our discussion here about computer-mediated communication. So basically, just any kind of opportunity you have to communicate through the internet or send an email, documents that you're sharing, this is what we would call computer-mediated communication. I think another step for you that's really important, and this isn't really explicitly bullet pointed too strongly in the chapter, I felt like it's not emphasized enough, is that you need to really read and follow what your organization's online communication policies are. At NSU, we have a lot of policies. It's like, one of those things that people can get bogged down in if they have to read all these different policies, but they're really important for making sure that we're all adhering to the same rules and same guidelines. And so that not only includes, how to use your computers, how to send emails, how to be available, but it also includes guidelines for using social media. So for example, one thing that I do personally is I try really hard to set my own kind of, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, out working hours throughout the workday. And if I post anything online on social media during those time frames, I try to keep it very professional, very oriented towards either what I'm doing teaching wise or something that I feel like, would be reasonable for me to just share in the workplace. The things that I then share for personal use outside of those hours would include like my silly kind of like wrestling opinions, or if I have more of a tweet or a post that I want to share that's politically oriented, I try to I really make a point to do that outside of my kind of professional working hours, so that there's a delineation between what I'm doing for work and what I'm doing personally. Hi, Liam. You say hi to everybody.
Hello.
Okay. Thank you. Go back in the living room. Another kind of guideline for you as you're thinking about professional excellence with technology is to make sure that you're using the right channels for the right kind of communication. So what kind of message are you sending? Is this personal, private? Is it something for everybody? Is it something an internal audience needs to see? But what kind of message are you sending? That should help you choose which channel is best: face-to-face, email, text, phone call, etc. You also need to take into consideration privacy issues. In your workplace, there will be lots of different guidelines on what is considered public information, what's considered internal information, what may be private, based on federal laws, state laws, internal organizational policies, etc. You also want to consider the audience. So are there certain people who prefer emails only? Do they prefer phone calls? Do they need a face-to-face conversation? Do they are you trying to reach a broad audience and so it needs to be shared in some kind of mass media forum or a social media? Think about who the audience is as you are also selecting which channel is going to work best for that. And then, as I just alluded to, what are the policies, what are the guidelines, the rules that your organization has for how to send or how to talk about specific messages. For example, they may want to only release, personnel related information from one location, from one like HR department on campus. And it goes out in a really specific format. Well, if you are tweeting out things or if you're making phone calls about stuff, that might be a violation of those norms. And so making sure that you understand the policies helps you follow them as well. I want you to feel free to pause the video for a couple minutes as you think through these following questions. Of course, you're under no obligation to do so, but I do think it's important to kind of consider this. This has a lot to do with what kind of work environment you'll like, what kind of relationship you might have with the people you work with, and then, of course, if you end up becoming a supervisor, how you work with other people around you. So think about these questions. How do you prefer to communicate with others? Are you a person who really likes face-to-face communication, or do you prefer electronic means, email, text, phone calls, YouTube videos? What is the importance, not only for you, but for your organization, for choosing the right communication channel for each different communication interaction? And then I want you to think about how those choices can reflect your own professionalism. Another question to consider is, what would you say to someone who is not communicating in a professional manner with you online? I think we probably all have anecdotes of people misusing, different kind of communication norms online. And what do you do? How do you address that with that person, especially if it's someone that you work with, in a way that doesn't create too much conflict, but allows you to continue, developing a working relationship with them? So here's your pause time. And we're back. I wanted to last touch on some of these downsides to technology. And this is a big part of your chapter, I think is worth going back and reading closely on your own. I'm going to touch briefly on these just so we can get through our presentation together. Employee surveillance is a big one, right? This is something that has a lot to do with organizational control and can be kind of a negative to technology in general, right? But when we talk about surveillance, it's monitoring, clock in, clock out times, the emails you send, what your work productivity is on your computer, limiting specific kinds of access to sites, lots of different kinds of surveillance that can go on that can really feel like an invasion of privacy in the workplace. Another can be time management. The time that it takes to learn different technology can be, daunting on its own. A lot of us are going through that right now while we transition from face-to-face classes to online classes. Okay. Another issue with time management is that I think it's actually related to information overload. You've got so much, at hand and the internet, man, it's got so much information, it can be difficult to stay on top of your tasks when given access to all the technology that we have. Information overload is a big problem, right? Knowing when to stop, knowing how to, minimize your exposure to lots of different channels or lots of different pieces of information to be able to be productive. I like to set limits for my phone on websites to visit so that I just can't, play solitaire on my phone or whatever, it allows me to be productive throughout the workday. And then, of course, we've already talked about this a little bit with our self-reflection, this notion of aggression online. People are sometimes wonderful online and sometimes monsters online. And that is a definite downside to using technology, is that you've got to figure out a way to not only be the person who's communicating well with those around you, but also how to handle those people who are poor communicators with you in return. All right, so a couple of reminders before we wrap it up here today. Your persuasive speech outline is due before 1 p.m. on Wednesday, as in 2 days from today. Your discussion board will also be posted, and I would like for us to complete that during our class period, 1 to 2 p.m., so that I can be in there and engaging with the material with you as well. You have a policy memo. You're still working with your groups. Hopefully you guys are able to figure out a way to complete this work electronically. I did extend the deadline on that, I believe. If not, then it's the same. But anyway, your policy memo is due before 1 p.m. Monday, March 30th. We are going to be doing persuasive speeches online. So what you'll need to do is film yourself giving your speech, upload that film. What do you need, Dustin? Your keys? You just wanted to come and knock over a pile of papers?
Yes, class. I wanted to do that.
Sorry, it distracted me. Make sure that you film yourself giving your speech, upload it to YouTube, and then share your YouTube link on Blackboard. All of that has to be done before 1 p.m. Friday, April 3rd. As a clarification point, there is no communication lab visit required for this speech. It's just, however, if you would like to receive some, help with communication, with your communication lab, with your speech, whatever, let me know, and I'm happy to kind of do a consultation with you if need be, or try to find another consultant from the lab to do some either email work with you or a Zoom meeting with you to complete that. All right. If you all have any questions or concerns, let me know. This is, an odd time for everyone, but we're going to make it through as best as we can. And I'm available as much as I possibly can be to help you through this. All right. See you soon.